Okay.
Hi, very good afternoon to all who are attending our talk. Today we will be covering on the topic of practical time mastery strategies for mental well-being, happiness, and success. So together with myself, my colleague Eugene will also be with me, right, covering certain parts of today's presentation. So let me start off with a couple of quotes pertaining to time mastery and the relationship it has on life, as well as be it you're a student, you're a working professional. I'll quote Alan Ragin of what he has said, quote, "Time equal to life, and therefore waste your time and waste your life, or master your time and master your life." I think it's very important for us to understand the importance of time and how we allocate time based on our priorities as well as what we intend to do. And another quote by Robin Sharma, "Distractions is the greatest theft of time." So we know if you may be a student, or perhaps you're a working professional, or you're a parent looking after kids, time is always not sufficient. We have 24 hours, but one of the very important things is not to have distractions affecting our daily work, how we prioritize. So we'll be talking about that, some of the strategies later on. But before I hand over to Eugene, I would like to personally share something which is very close to my heart. In my own quote, I would say, if you want your life to be blissful, then be very mindful of your time. What I intend here is basically we must be able to manage our energy. We must be able to prioritize what is important by understanding what then is the value by prioritizing what is important, how it makes an impact on what we are doing. So I'll talk more in the second half, sharing with all of you some of the strategies that perhaps you can adopt from a practical point of view. So without further ado, I will pass the time to Eugene right now for him to take all of us on the next part of it. Eugene?
Thank you, Kumar, for the kind introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to see all of you here today, and I'm happy to be here today with Kumar to give this talk on time mastery that is kindly organized by the National Library Board. One of my favorite hobbies is reading. As you can see from this photo of 3 rows of bookshelves in my study room, I actually have 9 rows in total. So in fact, over the years, I've bought a lot of books and also borrowed a lot of books from the National Library, and a lot of books are actually stacking on the floor because there's not enough space on the bookshelf. I must confess that I don't have enough time to read all these books that I've bought, but I'll come to that one by one. Having said that, I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity to write my first book. During my medical school, I published this in my 5th year of medical school. It's a book on dating strategies. It's called Love Clinic. And more recently, I wrote a book with Kumar on time mastery, and that's one of my favorite topics. And this is published by Candid Creation Publishing. So along the way, over the years, as I learned from different gurus on personal development, on time mastery, also to learn from friends and colleagues who are very good at managing their time, I discovered that there is this universal formula for time mastery, which is E times E equals T. Or you can say that it's efficiency times effectiveness equals time. Simply put, the more efficient you are or the more effective you are, or better still, if you are both very efficient and very effective, then you'll be able to manage your time very well. You have a lot of time in your life. You'll be a true time master. So we hope to share some of these concepts with you today. In the first half of this webinar, I'll be sharing with you how to find more time in your life, as well as how to transform yourself from being a chronic procrastinator, if you are one, to an action taker. And then Kumar will take over the next segment of the session, where you'll be talking about prioritizing, the art of prioritizing our lives, and also how to manage our energy with a laser-focused mindset. He's very, very, very good at that. And we'll end off the session with questions and answers, where we'll be very happy to take your questions. So let's move on to how to find more time in our life. A very common excuse that people give, and sometimes I give myself as well, is I don't have enough time to do something. But if you think about it, we all have 24 hours a day, and at the end of every day, the time, this 24-hour bank is replenished. So where did all this time actually go to? The best strategy to find more time in your life is actually to do a focused personal time audit. So you're not focusing on no time, but you're focusing on how to find time. So why do you want to do a personal time audit? Firstly, you want to evaluate how precisely, how exactly are you using your time right now. And you want to identify the time wasters, the areas of your life that you're spending time unproductively on lower value activities. And after that, you'll be able to determine the amount of free time that you have based on this time audit. So that's very useful because you may not be aware of this free time that you actually have in your life. I came across this article on Channel News Asia in 2011, which stated that Singaporeans spend an average of 25 hours online per week. So if you divide that by 7, it's about 3.5 hours per day online. At the time, it was, very huge number, very startling figure. But you fast forward to 2017, closer to our current time, where this Straits Times report actually stated that people in Singapore spend an average of 12 hours a day on their gadgets. So, almost the whole time when awake, we are actually glued to our screens. That's true for many of us, at least based on this survey of people in Singapore. And I think this trend will likely increase, but wouldn't be too much because there's a limit to the number of hours we have in a day. We also need time to sleep and to do other activities as well. So let's move on to this personal time audits. And there's a few approaches to do it. For today's talk, I'll be talking about the weekly time audits. So in a week, we all have 24 hours a day, and we have 7 days a week. So 7 times 24 is 168. That's why we have 168 hours in a week. So for example, if you work 9 hours a day over 5 days, so 9 times 5 is 45 hours. So you will spend 45 hours of work each week. And you spend maybe 7 hours of 7 hours sleeping every day, 7 days, so that's 49 hours, and so on. So maybe you spend 20 hours a week doing family, doing housework, spending time with your family, 14 hours on transport, 12 hours on meals, 10 hours on leisure, or maybe more, 7 hours on personal care, such as personal grooming, showering, makeup if applicable, so maybe 7 hours on other activities like walking your dog, that's not in this list. So if you add up the numbers, you'll find that you have spent, in this example, 164 hours in a week. So there's actually 4 hours of free time that is actually unused, potentially, that you can uncover and actually use it to work on higher value activities. For example, to work on a major goal, or to catch up on your reading, or even to exercise to keep yourself fit. So this is an example of a weekly time audit template that we have created. It's available for download in PDF form on our website, timemasterylab.com. So please feel free to get a copy, and please feel free to edit the fields to make it fit your individual lifestyle as well as circumstances. So after we've done this time audit, we want to then identify the biggest time wasters and then take action to remedy them. For example, if you find yourself working very, very long hours, then you want to maybe work less hours, be more productive in your work so that you can actually work a bit lesser. But there's a limit to how less you can work because your boss wouldn't be happy if you do not work at all, right? The other thing is that if you find yourself sleeping a lot, maybe like 8-9 hours a day, you might want to consider cutting down by 30 minutes to an hour every day, less sleep, but still very high quality sleep so that you can wake up feeling refreshed in the morning. And you can use that extra time, extra 1 hour or 30 minutes to work on high value activities, like to exercise or to catch up on your reading or to do planning. And if you find yourself traveling a lot, spending a lot of time on public transport or during driving, you might want to read or listen to educational audio during these commutes. And better still, if your schedule is a bit flexible, you can determine what time you start school or start work, then you might want to consider avoiding peak hour traffic. So perhaps you can leave house a little bit earlier in the day, or you can leave house a little bit later so that you avoid this peak hour traffic, spend less time being stuck in the traffic jam. And definitely, a lot of us are guilty, myself included, of watching videos, sometimes mindlessly, unpurposefully, on TV, on YouTube, Facebook videos, etc. So we need to be mindful of this and try to, reduce such activities if they don't serve us well. And we want to avoid frequent checking of our messages, or our Facebook feed, emails, and so on. So one suggestion is that instead of checking every 10-15 minutes, which what some people do, you might want to set aside specific time blocks of the day to check all these messages. For example, maybe 30 minutes after lunch and 30 minutes after dinner to do all these checking instead of checking throughout the day, because that's very disruptive and it really affects your focus. So moving on to the next section of the talk, which is how to transform yourself from being a procrastinator to an action taker. So to master time, we really need to control this thing called procrastination. It's the enemy of time mastery. And procrastination means to delay and put off a task until another time or day in the future. It's actually a very natural human tendency to procrastinate. I think a lot of us are not born to be natural action takers. In fact, procrastination is not always bad. It's double-edged sword. There are some times when it's good to procrastinate. For example, just recently there was this Lazada sale, and it appeared on my app. I saw this Lazada sale and saw this Dyson fan. Very cool-looking Dyson fan that's usually about $700, and now it's costing like $400 over. So there's a significant discount. I was very, very tempted to buy it. I was really looking at it very hard. I was spending about 30 minutes on it. So it was procrastination, and eventually I thought maybe I should wait for the next big sale. Maybe there'll be even bigger discount. This not good enough. And I don't really need this fan because it's more of an accessory, luxury item. It's not a necessity. So I didn't buy. Save some money. So when it comes to high value activities, it's good to transform ourselves from being a procrastinator to a super action taker. All right. And I'd like to share with you 3 strategies today to conquer procrastination so you can start taking action. The first strategy is to up the stakes, right? To up the pain and up the pleasure. Because as humans, we're naturally driven to avoid pain and to seek pleasure. And between the two, I would say we are more driven to avoid pain than to seek pleasure. But both forces are important. So for example, if you have been working from home for a while or studying, at home, sitting long hours in your chair, and you have this very bad backache and neck ache, and then suddenly you check your Facebook and this chair appears, says it's one of the most comfortable chairs in the world. You're made of Napa leather, very, very comfortable, very good support. And if you sit on it, all the pain will evaporate, you feel fantastic, So that's how the advertisers actually, market their products to us. They know these 2 forces of pain and pleasure, and they actually use this to motivate you, to avoid pain and to seek pleasure. So you can actually use these forces in our life. So let me give you an example. Say, for example, if I have an assignment that is due in 6 weeks' time on the 30th of September. All right, so right now today is the 20th of August, so I have about 6 weeks to do the assignment. I can choose to do it now, or can choose to do it maybe later, but I really want to do it now. So my thought process will be this, what is the problem if I don't do it now? Maybe if I delay it until the last 2 weeks of September, I'll be very stressed. There may be other sudden unexpected conflicting events, happening. I don't have enough time to do this project. And I'll be severely penalized or scolded by my boss, if I don't finish this by the deadline. So the stakes are really high. There's a lot of pain involved. I can't afford not to start on this early. And what pleasure would I feel? Actually, it's not pleasurable to work on this assignment, But maybe I can switch on some nice music, relax myself. And maybe if I finish one section of it, I'll treat myself to a Starbucks Frappuccino, or whatever works for you. So, try to create some pleasure and try to, talk to yourself, psycho yourself, about this pain, and try to up both. And that's how you motivate yourself to just do the assignment now, right? Instead of delaying further. Strategy number 2 is to set an artificial deadline. There's this Parkinson's law which states that work expands to fill the time allocated for it. So for example, if your boss gives you 1 week to write out the minutes for a meeting that you have attended, these minutes reports, you can take 1 week to do it, and that's what you usually do because the boss gives you 1 week. But if the boss says, oh, I need this minutes report by tomorrow, please spend the rest of your day working on this. You don't have to do anything else. If you need to stay back overtime, I'll pay you OT pay. You just give me this report by today. So you have no choice, you'll be driven to work on this report, and I'm sure you'll be able to finish it by that day. So it's the same report, in different circumstances, you actually finish it in 1 day versus 1 week. That depends on the time you are given. So that's Parkinson's law. So to take advantage of this law to make it favorable for our time management, we want to give ourselves half the usual time, or less of the usual time to complete the task, not the full time. For example, going back to my previous example of this assignment being due on 30th of September, so I'll tell myself that my own internal deadline is first week of September, maybe the Sunday, the last day of the first week of September, and I really need to take this seriously and finish my assignment by then. So with a shorter time frame, a tighter deadline, there will be a greater sense of urgency, and I'll go about doing it more quickly, more efficiently. So that's how I can conquer procrastination. And moving on to the third strategy, which is one of my favorite strategies for beating procrastination. So we call it the 1 minute rule. It's actually based on Newton's first law, which is the law of momentum. So it states that the object at rest will continue to be at rest unless an opposing force acts on it. And also if the object is moving, it will continue to move unless there's a force that acts on it. So imagine if you have a toy car on the floor. Imagine that the floor is frictionless, there's no friction. The car will just stay there, it doesn't move. But if you give it a push, then the car will start moving, and you keep on moving because there's no friction to stop it, and assuming there's no obstacle to stop it as well. So you just keep on moving until it hits an obstacle, or until you create an opposing force to stop this car. So that's Newton's first law. So basically, what it's saying is that it's difficult to start doing something, but once you start doing something, it's actually difficult to stop. So that's how we apply this in our life. Often, when we want to do a big project, or assignment, or something important in our life, even exercise and so on, the first part, the first initial phase is always the most difficult because there's a lot of inertia. That's Newton's law. But once you can overcome this inertia artificially, then there'll be natural momentum that actually takes over and drives us through the rest of the task. So we want to take advantage of this law to work in our favor. So let me give you an example of how I apply this 1 minute rule. So often when I come back from work in the evening, let's say about 6-7 p.m., I like to go for a quick jog before I have dinner, right? So go to exercise regularly if the weather permits. But after a long day at work, I feel very tired when I reach home. I'll have a lot of excuses coming to my mind, to my head. Maybe I'll say that, oh, the weather is so hot today, or I'm so tired, why don't I do it another day? Why don't I jog tomorrow? Let me take a break, let me check my Facebook feed now. Or let me play with my son, for example. So many excuses. So what I do is I just drown out all these voices in my head, right? Shut them out. Tell myself, okay, I'll just take 1 minute. I'll quickly switch into my running gear. I'll put on a t-shirt, shorts, socks, running shoes, and I'll step out of the house, jog a few steps. It takes about 1 minute or 2 minutes. And after I jog that few steps, it'll be very easy, very natural for me to continue jogging for the rest of my jogging journey, which is about 10-15 minutes. And then I just go for very quick jogs. So the first part is very difficult, but once it started, once you create the artificial momentum, then the natural momentum will actually take over, and you'll be able to continue the rest of your task smoothly. So this 1 minute rule is very powerful in overcoming inertia, and I strongly suggest that you apply it in different areas of your life if you need to overcome inertia. So just to summarize this section of conquering procrastination, right? The first strategy will be to up the stakes, to up the pain and up the pleasure. Talk to yourself about that, to motivate yourself to take action. And secondly, the second rule is actually to shorten the deadline, to create an artificial deadline so that you have a greater sense of urgency to work on something. And thirdly is the 1 minute rule, to manually create some momentum in the first minute so that natural momentum takes over and you can conquer procrastination this way. So I hope you learned something from this part of the sharing. And at this juncture, I would like to hand over the next session of the talk to my very good friend Kumar, who will be talking to you about the art of prioritizing as well as managing your energy with a laser-focused mindset. So over to you, Kumar.
Yeah. Thank you, Eugene, for sharing very pragmatic tips or strategies on procrastination, and I'm sure, and I hope, we hope that the participants will benefit from that. Yeah, for the next part of the segment, I'll be touching on prioritizing your priorities. And importantly, as all of us know, we have a lot of things on hand, be it you're a student, be it you're a working adult, you're a parent. But the question is that among all these many things that you have on hand, where would you focus your energy? How would you then prioritize? So I'd like to perhaps start off the conversation by quoting this. Focusing 20% of your activities account for 80% of your success. So we need to give priority to the 20%. So what action step do we need to take? Prioritizing your task with absolute precision and clarity. And let me explain that. So perhaps we need to be mindful that all of you are from different contexts. For example, if you are a student, you probably will be enrolled in a number of modules or courses. You would have assignments. You would probably be involved in extracurricular activities. But the question is, how would you then prioritize what is important, what is urgent, so that you'll be able to focus your energy and then leave out the rest later? So for example, if you're a working adult, you're a parent, you probably have to divide your energy of spending quality time with your kids, and as well as managing workload. But if you look closer, specifically on the workload, what are some of the things that you need to deal with or spend your energy on that particular day? So perhaps you need to prioritize that. And I'll be sharing with you a couple of pointers of how to do that through questions, through some tips in a minute of time. So let's move on to look at some of the strategies or tips. So it's very important that we focus and prioritize on action items of high value. So let me explain what is high value. So for example, you probably you're a working adult and you have a couple of deadlines, you have a couple of meetings coming, in the day or perhaps the next few days. But again, where would you put your energy? How would you then prioritize which action would go first? So one of the things that you may want to ask is, what is the high value? What is really urgent, important that you need to do it immediately, but some of the other aspects, some of the other items that could perhaps wait a bit later? The second question is, reflect and identify what is high value to you depending on your context. So this comes a bit more complex because depending on your role, so when I say role, you could be just merely a student, right? Enrolled in taking a couple of courses, or perhaps you are a parent as well as you're a working parent, looking after your kids, perhaps even looking after elderly parents. So what is high value to you? That is something that you have to sit down and think about and perhaps pen it down. And within the high value, you need to prioritize what then are you going to focus your energy on. So one of the very important things that we need to reflect on is your roles that you play. So you could be, you're a part-time student, you're a parent, you're a working professional. So within that cluster, you need to then look into items of high value. So as I've said, high value could be interpreted in terms of urgency, immediate, perhaps something that you need to focus on, where we go back to the key aspect of 20% versus 80%. Some of it, there could be a lot of things on that particular day that you perhaps perceive to do, but then you need to take a stop and try to understand what is the high value, what is the priority items that you need to focus on, and the rest could perhaps wait. So some of the guiding pointers that we thought would be useful for all of you. So first question, what would have the most positive impact? So for example, you want to be involved in a lot of extracurricular activities. You're a person who like to go to and involve in different sports. But again, you need to ask yourself, again, prioritizing, what kind of time do you have on the leisure, and where would you want to put your energy, and how does that make a positive impact on you? So again, as you know, we all are in different life stages, right? You can be a young, vibrant person, young man or woman, or probably you are in the later stage of your life where you need to understand that certain aspects of sports may not be too relevant to you, but perhaps something else could be more important or relevant, or you could make a positive impact by doing that. So this is one question that you perhaps have to try to put it in your context, your roles that you're playing, to find out the answer. The second important question, or perhaps note, is to resist the temptation to clear the not so vital or smaller tasks first. So what do I mean by that? In a daily activities, we know that there's a lot of probably expectations or assigned tasks that may be given to us, or we are supposedly to fulfill. But the question is, what is the important urgent ones that you need to attend to immediately? Some of the requests, some of the tasks that could be perhaps smaller, you could wait, you could not immediately respond to that. A good example that I could share would be emails, be it personal emails or in a work context. You probably will receive, right, a lot of emails if you are a working professional. But the question is, within the emails, your bosses would probably assign you some tasks, or there'll be requests from your colleagues of getting some help from you. So you need to, again, look at that email at a particular time, try to look at what are some of the things that has to be done immediately that needs that energy to be focused on at that phase of time. And then prioritize the smaller tasks that perhaps, even if it is simply replying later on. So can you imagine trying to reply all this, the smaller task emails first, comparatively to get things, what is important and urgent immediately. So that is going to really affect your time management or even energy management. So the third point that we thought would be useful for all of you is always remind yourself to start with what is most crucial. As much as it seems to be so simple in theory here, we tend, as we are involved in various roles, we forget to not focus on what is the most crucial, what then needs to be done immediately, so that we can spend that energy and achieve productivity in what we are doing. Some of the time, a good example would be, for example, there could be messages coming in Facebook, especially with social media, which then it becomes part and parcel of our life. You could be busy, being engaged in replying messages in Facebook, right, on other platforms, that you might just overlook and be blind spotted on those items which need your energy and time at that moment of time. So let's look at some of the time saver questions that perhaps would be useful for all of you. And these questions are reflective questions that perhaps you could find answers for. The first one, which task do I need to address first today to stand me in a good state tomorrow? So a very good example would be, if you're a student, you have to ask yourself, what is your immediate deadline? What is your immediate priority? Maybe you have a quiz the next few days. You should spend your energy and time focusing on them. Assuming you're a parent, a working professional, your children's examination is coming and you need to perhaps give some moral support for your kids. You may need to prioritize and say that, look, I probably have to intervene and have to block off a certain amount of time to spend time with my children so that they are able to have that moral support, no matter how busy I am. And you need to allocate that consciously so that they get the moral support and their life goes on. Perhaps then you would be busy doing other things on your roles rather. The next question that you may want to ask yourself is, which task would get me into trouble or cause a negative effect if I do not get it done? For example, some urgent requests or tasks that your boss expects you to do. So obviously, you need to prioritize that. You need to quickly prioritize and put your energy and focus on that so that you'll be able to meet perhaps the tight deadline which is given to you. Or if you don't do that, what would be the negative effect? Perhaps you get a scolding, you could even affect your performance, and so on and so forth. There's recurring and repercussions due to that. Third point, what do my boss, colleagues, teacher, project group mates, or friends need most from me right now? So the question is that, as I said, it may not be as simple when you look at it from a practical or pragmatic point of view, because we all play different roles. We play multiple roles. So from that aspect, holistic aspect, you need to be able to cluster each role and identify and ask yourself what is needed in each of the roles at that moment of time, and then prioritize from that perspective. Otherwise, you get kind of messed up because there are multiple roles that needs your energy. So by looking at each of your role, how and what would you prioritize at that phase? For example, you can take it a day, can take it within a week, for example. So the last question here that might be useful for your reflection is, why is the top task I've identified the most important task that I have to do now? So the question is that you have to ask yourself, did I actually prioritize it correctly? Why must I do that? If I don't do that, what is some of the negative effect? Would it cause a huge impact, negative impact, repercussion on something? So this is something very contextualized to the roles that you play, be it you're a student, be it you are a working professional, you're a parent, homemaker. So depending on that, you perhaps this answer, by answering this question, it would direct you towards a positive direction. So in the next slide, I would like to share with all of you, right, a metrics that myself and Eugene have worked on that we thought would be very useful for you. So in this matrix, you could see the Y and the X-axis. Two variables are being used to make sure that one will be able to identify how to prioritize in terms of urgency as well as importance, right? So urgency here refers to the tasks that need to be done immediately, right? Vital, on the other axis, refers to the tasks that are of importance, but may not necessarily be done immediately. So what does this matrix does? So it requests, and it would probably want you to prioritize, list down all your items, or all your tasks rather, and then based on these two variables, it allows you to get into different quadrants. Now that is very important because, as I said earlier, we hold multiple roles. And within that role, you have to prioritize. And this matrix actually allow that task in different roles that you're playing, able to get into different quadrants very in a structured manner, where you would be able to then look at what and which one must you focus on and why you need to focus on. So how do you use this time saver matrix? Basically, there are 4 steps, which we have detailed that out in our book. Number 1, list down all the tasks that need to be addressed and dealt with. So that's the very, very first thing. You need to list down the task. Second step, use the essential time saver questions to help you prioritize your tasks in terms of how urgent and how vital are they. So some of the questions that I've shared earlier would help you then to perhaps identify which one would get into the vital aspect, which one would get into the urgent aspect. And then the third step would require you to assign each task that you have penned down to one of the 8 categories in the time saver matrix. And then the last step that we have came out with is that after identifying and putting the task into different quadrants, then you can use the analysis table that we have came up with for advice of how you should manage each task. So by doing that, it forms a very systematic approach that which one to focus first, and then within that, you follow which one to focus on later, where you kind of like perhaps direct you to the correct direction there, where you can manage your energy at the same time fulfill the necessary tasks at hand. Now, the second strategy I would like to share with all of you is managing your energy with a laser-focused mindset. Now, so again, I would like to read out a quote by Alexander Graham Bell, right, a scientist and inventor. He says, quote, "Concentrate all your thoughts upon the work at hand, and the sun's rays do not burn until brought to a focus," unquote. So basically, for maximum efficiency, one must really focus on the task at hand and limit multitasking. So the action step is really about focusing 100% of your energy, right, on a single task at any one time. Sounds so simple, but as I said, we are all performing multiple roles. Then we would probably have to multitask. Multitask becomes part and parcel of an activity that we need to do. But within the priority of tasks, if you can do it well, you'll be able to focus perhaps on a single task, put that energy, get it done, and then move on to the other part of it. And there's a lot of advantages of doing that, where you can actually achieve productivity and quality on what you're doing. Now, the significance of developing a laser focus mindset is basically that it allows your entire attention that you have and your energy on the task in front of you. So obviously, to achieve higher productivity and quality outcomes. So for example, you have a report which is due in 3 hours, and perhaps you need to give a bit of attention to your children if you're working from, in this situation, for example, in a pandemic. So what would you then do? You probably have to manage your time, in other words, to say that, can I do it, focus on this task 2 hours away from my children, perhaps, and then get it done well, and then you spend your energy, perhaps another 1 hour, another half an hour with your children to give them the attention or moral support, and so on and so forth. Now, let's move on to the next part, where it actually refers to multitasking, right? So performing or getting involved in various tasks concurrently. So multitasking involves where you have different tasks at hand. So the commonly held belief that we can multitask and do multiple tasks effectively, versus evidence shows that we are not able to effectively focus on more than one thing at a time. So it is very clear that as much as we think that we are doing a good job, but if you're going to multitask, the side effect that you probably have is that you are not able to achieve quality of work, productivity, and get it done well. So multitask unimportant activities, right? So that you do not end up spending too much time on them. Easier said to be than done, but again, within the activities that you have, you probably have to identify what is the more important one, urgent one, or perhaps can you even classify the unimportant activities within that. Now, strategies to limit multitasking. The first aspect before even getting to the strategies is really about focusing and understanding the root causes and motivation that lead to it. Secondly, to identify and be aware of the contributing factors of why multitasking happens, and then take actions. So quickly, I'm going to cover three strategies, which perhaps I hope will be useful for you. Number one is really to prioritize the do list. So within the do list that you have, you can, for example, use the metrics that we come out with, and then prioritize what is important, what is vital, what is urgent, what is vital. So by doing that, you are able to sequentially do what is at hand well and do it well. The next strategy is about time blocks. So in a day, you probably would have a lot of things to do, or you need to deal with. But by trying to have clusters of phases that you need to focus on, it will help you. For example, checking of emails is a common thing that we all do. But how often do you need to check your email? Perhaps you can allocate half an hour in the morning, and you don't check the emails because your energy would then get into doing some other reports, some other aspects, and then you may want to check in the afternoon, right? Not turning on your email Outlook and perhaps looking at it every 15 minutes. That's going to distract you. The last strategy is self-awareness check. So very importantly, we are living in a very dynamic, evolving world. Every day, things are changing. So it is very important for us to have touch points to review what we have prioritized, perhaps align, adapt, change the prioritized list as you go along. So that is a self-awareness check, because it's not something that you're going to do it and perhaps it's going to be staying stagnant for weeks and weeks and so on and so forth, depending on your role. So you need to have a touch point of doing a self-awareness check. I think that is very crucial. Now, we have come to the end of our presentation, but before I leave the next segment of Q&A, perhaps we have around 10 minutes, let me quickly touch on the actionable ideas and strategies of what we focus on in our book. Basically, it is about clearly identifying, avoiding falling into time-wasting traps. We have suggested strategies on that very pragmatically, clarifying how to prioritize doing your tasks, right? And how do you do it? We have come up with some metrics that probably help you, even if you're a layperson, right? A homemaker, how would that efficiency increases? Last but not least, super change your productivity using and that's the reason why we call that as street smart strategies. That anyone, no matter what role that you perform, will be able to use them. Now, before I hand over to the Q&A segment, this would be our website. You can actually get in. We have actually come up with a lot of blogs, which is free of charge. You can just go in and enjoy reading that. And obviously, if you have any questions that you would like to reach out to us, you can actually use the email address as I flash, so that we can actually address your questions, after this talk. So thank you very much for listening. I will pass the segment to the Q&A. Xiang?
Hello, thank you. Hi, thank you very much, Dr. Rajaram and Dr. Tan, for your very informative and I think very useful talk. I think the strategies are all very actionable, and I do find it quite interesting that it's true we all tend to multitask and we think that makes us more efficient and more effective in getting our work done, but that's That's really not true. And personally, I find it very stressful when I have to multitask. All right, so we have about 10 minutes for Q&A. Would anybody like to ask a question? As I've typed in the chat panel, there are two ways that you can do this. You can type your question directly in the Q&A panel, or you can also raise your hand and I will unmute you so that you can ask your question. Okay, maybe everyone will need some time to think about the questions. Oh, okay, we have one. All right, so the question is, well, thank you very much for sharing, Dr. Tan and Dr. Rajaram. How do you overcome chronic procrastination and manage time effectively and efficiently to make it sustainable?
Eugene, you want
Okay,
to take
yes,
on?
yeah, okay, I'll take this question. So thank you very much for this very good question, very important question. The question is, how do we overcome chronic procrastination and manage time effectively and efficiently? Right, so actually the key word in this question is sustainable. How do we sustain this? I think it's not possible to always, defeat procrastination at all times. Sometimes we will still tend to procrastinate a little bit here and there, which is all right because it's natural human tendency. But what's important is to be aware that we are doing that, we are procrastinating, especially if we have a high value task in front of us, something that's important, that we know is important, but we are somehow procrastinating to take action. So that's what we need to be aware of. And some of the strategies that I've shared earlier will be to for example, the 1 minute rule. You just launch into it 1 minute and then you just let natural momentum take over. Or you can just tell yourself, what are the pain and what's the pleasure that you may experience if you don't do this task right now. And of course, you can give yourself an earlier deadline, a shorter deadline to do it so that you'll be more productive. You'll have a greater sense of urgency to do this right now.
Yeah, if I have to add on Eugene's, thanks, wonderful, excellent points, Eugene. I would like to just add on that, and the part especially which is very close to a very pragmatic aspect is pain and pleasure, is what Eugene was actually saying and sharing, and something that we may want to use it, and it's quite powerful because whenever we procrastinate anything that is on hand, is basically because we feel that, look, I think what is our motivation? How do we get inspired to do that? So I think if you could actually kind of reflect and have your mindset shift to see what is the outcome, what would you be able to see from a positive aspect where it actually makes a inspiration for you. So most of the time we tend to get out there, as what Eugene was sharing, right? If you want to go for jogging, you come up with a lot of excuses, but then you have to instill in your mind, it is something important, it is going to be healthy, it's going to be okay, I'm going to breathe in fresh air, and it's going to be good. So I think those inspirations that you probably will help very pragmatically for us to push ourselves or probably drive ourselves towards overcoming procrastination. Hope that helps.
All right, next question. To clarify, should we concentrate on and clear the urgent tasks first before working on the important tasks?
Yep. Perhaps Eugene, I will take on this question and you can come in as you. So yeah, so this is very important because as earlier I shared, depending on the rules, not only depending on the rules, I think it's very important to focus on urgent tasks, that's for sure. But also you need to be mindful of your role that you're performing in order for you to be effective. For example, you could be doing multiple roles, but what is important is that you need to be able to identify the difference between urgent and important. And that's where sometimes people find it very difficult, right? For example, I give you a very simple example. Maybe it is on your work and with your children, right? Both seems to be urgent. Now, again, you need to prioritize these two and say, look, if there's a real need to attend to your children and you think that's really, really urgent, and then you have to rationalize and say that, okay, let me address this, which is very, very urgent because I have to spend 10 minutes, 15 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour. But then you have to rationalize and understand that this has to go next. But if you are going to juggle with both of this, I'm very sure that you're not going to do a good job on either one of it. So I hope that shed some light.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Koma. So a lot of times, if something is really urgent, then you have to take action on it first. But the problem is that after we have taken action on these urgent tasks, then we have this pile of so-called important tasks that we tend to procrastinate or hesitate on, and we actually go on to spend time on the quadrant 4 tasks, which are those unimportant and non-urgent tasks. So we tend to drown ourselves in those tasks more than this this list of important tasks. So it's good to be aware of this and take action at the appropriate time. If something is not so urgent, maybe semi-urgent, then if you have a little leeway to leave it aside first, then you can actually spend that time to work on the important task first. So I think there's one.
Next question.
Next question.
All right, so we have an attendee say that he or she only can focus at night, and he or she is more productive after 9 p.m., but other hours of the day he's procrastinating or multitasking. So how can this attendee concentrate in the day?
Can I?
Yeah, Eugene, go ahead. Eugene,
okay, so this is a very important question, very interesting question, because although we are doing so-called a time audit, that's what we advocate. It's also actually very important to do an energy audit to find out which hours of the day that you are most productive and more focused, because this will differ from person to person, and we need to take advantage of this awareness of this high value, high focus time to actually work on selectively work on the more important, higher value activities. So for this particular question, this person who asked this question, he can work more effectively at night, more productive at night. So perhaps after 9 p.m., you might want to do something higher value, for example, some planning work, or reading, or working on some important project, after 9 p.m. In the daytime, you might want to do something so-called lower or medium value activities, maybe some repetitive tasks that do not need so much focus or concentration. So you try to divide your schedule to match your energy levels and focus levels.
Right. Yeah, excellent point, Eugene. If I could just add on to that question, yeah, I totally agree where different people would have different time phase of productivity. So if you're a person who actually can concentrate at night, for example, my personal experience is that I have to do 3 important things, right? Manage my people, right? Teach, as well as do research. So during the day, I'm very, very busy managing people, perhaps also getting the teaching done. So when you teach, there's a lot of energy that is being spent. But at night, or for me, it's either the very wee morning or probably very early in the morning is my most productive time. So I tend to allocate at least 1 or 2 hours for writing, and I do that in a very disciplined manner. So perhaps on the person who asked this question, you may want to ask yourself how that would help you, depending, as I've said, it depends on your role that you play, and then you need to then contextualize this methodology pertaining to what you're doing. I hope that helps.
Okay, so a quick time check. We have about 3 minutes left, so we'll just take 2 more questions. All right, what an interesting one. How to teach or train a tween or teen to stop procrastinating important tasks but less interesting? Your comments, please.
Yes, maybe I'll take this question first. All right, so this I think this related to a different question being asked, whether the strategies are applicable across different cultures, different environments, and different age groups. I would say definitely, teenagers definitely they have their own stressors as well. They're overwhelmed with schoolwork, with enrichment activities, tuition, and so on. They have their own hobbies and leisures to pursue as well, CCAs. So they are definitely very overwhelmed, and it's important to actually inculcate these principles of time management from an early age in our children, in the teenagers, because these principles are actually fundamental principles. And as you progress throughout your life, no matter what work you do, what stage of your life you're at, these principles will still apply. You just have to adapt them. So I think it's important to share these principles with your child or with someone who's younger, was the teenage years, and hopefully they can learn some of these and apply 1 or 2 of these principles in their life, and that will be very helpful.
Just, yeah, excellent point, Eugene, and I agree with that, where the methodology comes next, but I think fundamentally, if I have to address the question very specifically and explicitly, is actually the value system. So, for example, one of the things that, which is very important, tends to be, simple, but self-discipline, right? Self-discipline is a value where you probably have to ingrain from the start, and I think in different phases as they grow up, you can not preach, but have to highlight and emphasize the importance of the self-discipline. All right, this is only one of the many values. So slowly that becomes part and parcel of the conditioning. And I use the word conditioning because that is very much really needed, where it becomes part of that person before he can actually apply methodologies. The methodologies are intervention, but I think fundamentally we also need to be able to acknowledge that there are certain aspects that need to be ingrained, need to be conditioned. I hope that helps.
Then Kumar, to add on, so if the task is less interesting, we can actually try to increase the interest in the task. For example, to explain the importance of it, or to give some rewards, create some rewards that can be taken after the task is completed.
Right. Excellent point, Eugene. I totally agree with that, where the interest actually varies with different teenagers. Some of them are very self-motivated. Some of them need some push, and at least for the start. So you may want to find what actually interests them. It could be small rewards, small carrots dangling. So if they could actually, and I call that a small wins. So if they are able to achieve small wins, reward them. Re-emphasize that. It sounds simple, but I think in daily aspect of practicality, it tends to be very of a self-conscious that we need to re-emphasize this. No, once this is done, then the intervention comes into place. The methodology really helps you to propel ahead. Yeah, great. John, you want to take one more question, or is it time for us? Or
maybe we'll just have one last question. Would either Dr. Rajaram or Dr. Tan want to choose a question that you think is most important to address?
Right.
I think maybe there's one question, if I may choose, Kumar. Yeah. How do we eliminate distraction?
Right.
Just quickly say one or 2 points about this. So definitely distractions are inevitable in our life. There's so many distractions at any point in time. So what I do is that I like to write down a list of tasks that I need to do. Even though I have it in my mind, but I find that it's actually more efficient and more effective if I just write it down on paper, 3 tasks or 5 tasks I need to do in that session, and I'll just check off this task. So if there's any distraction that comes out, for example, I suddenly remember I need to go and buy something later on, I'll just write it down first on that same piece of paper as well. Then after that, I'll just not think about it because I have it written down already. So maybe I'll go and buy this item later on. There's no hurry. So that's how I manage my distractions. I actually write them down. Also write down my list of tasks I need to do, to focus on. Kumar, would you like to?
Yeah, right. Excellent point, Eugene, and I agree with that. Just to add on is actually acknowledging, because when there's a lot of distraction coming, I give you a very simple example today, which all of us are involved in social media. Facebook or LinkedIn, and be it anything. So, or even mobile phones could be a distraction. But how do you deal with them is something that one has to try to acknowledge. You see the messages, you do not need to respond immediately. But or have the time blocks. Earlier on, I was talking about that. I think that's very important, because if you are able to commit a time phase, I want to check the phone maybe an hour. Hourly, for example, if you think that there's urgent messages coming in, and you may want to also direct some of the urgent things just to the email. So you need to have this ecosystem built within you in order for you to be disciplined, as well as able to manage these distractions. I hope that adds to what Eugene was also saying. Yeah.
All right, thank you everyone for your very interesting questions. I'm afraid we have to wrap up today's session, but as I've mentioned in the chat, you can still reach out to our speakers either via the website or the Gmail address. So very quickly, let me just show some of the books that have been recommended. You can check these books out at NLB's Overdrive site. Or you can scan the QR codes here. I'll also be sending out all these book recommendations together with the slides in an email afterwards, so that you can check them out in your own time. We'll be having more lunchtime talks coming up in the month. The next one is on the 27th of August, so please feel free to register if you're able to attend. Last but not least, before you leave, we'd just like to ask for a few minutes of your time to give us your feedback. So again, you can either scan this QR code or click on the URL that should be pasted in the chat panel. So I think that's we've come to the end of today's session. Thank you so much for your very, very useful, very insightful sharing, Drs. Rajaram and Dr. Tan. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to do this sharing with us. So I'll just leave this screen on for a few minutes so that you can access the site, and then I will close this session in about 1 or 2 minutes time at about 1:35, 1:36. Thank you everyone for attending today's session. I hope you found it useful, and have a great afternoon ahead.
Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you everyone. I appreciate your attendance. Have a great afternoon.